episode. We are happy to welcome Nick, who's the VP Engineering at Reddit, and who's going to talk about how to maintain a good culture when you have to scale really fast.
Okay.
It's the right time. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a weird intro. Thanks, you guys. Where's the clicker, by the way? Where's all my... All right, let me practice this real quick. Okay, cool. All right. So just want to do a quick intro. I'm Nick Caldwell, VP of Engineering over at Reddit. Any Reddit fans in here? Yes, I love that. Makes me feel good. You know, like my last job, I was working on business intelligence software, and I would ask people like, hey, who uses my software? Dead silence. Great thing. So I hope you guys enjoyed the platform. We got a lot of change going on at Reddit, which I'll tell you about in a minute. Just to wrap up my intro here, before working at Reddit, I was general manager at Microsoft working on a product called Power BI. That was a team that I grew from 10 people up to around 500. MIT class of 03, go Beavers. Yep. And Berkeley MBA class of 15, go Bears. There we go. All right. Sometimes you get the whole audience rolling on that one. So what's going on at Reddit? Some quick stats. So I see most of you guys are Reddit users, I think the majority of you, but you may not know a couple of these interesting stats. Reddit is the 4th largest website in the United States according to Alexa, and the 7th largest in the world. That's 325 million monthly active users. There's a lot going on at Reddit. New executive team. Steve Huffman and Alexis Ohanian came back about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Dramatically different product vision. Not a really complicated product vision. We just want to make money. But that is different from how it was previously being operated. And then we're keeping it real here, Plato. And then rapid expansion. So this chart on the right, this chart here on the right side is showing the growth of the company up until Q1 of 2017. We've actually far surpassed that since I made this slide. So Reddit is growing really, really fast. And the purpose of this talk is really to talk about how you grow without losing control. And why does that matter? Well, Reddit is a startup. A few years back, there was a report, Startup Genome report. This was a survey some of you guys may have heard about. What they did was they surveyed 1,000 different startups, ones that have succeeded, been acquired, failed. And it turns out within 3 years, 90% of startups fail. And of those, 43% fail due to issues of scaling. Really important to me because I want my Reddit stock options to be worth something someday. Given that, I want to tell you about my first week at Reddit. And you have to remember my background is I'm coming from Microsoft. I was from a very, very large company with hundreds of thousands of people running a multi-100 person organization. So this is my first week at Reddit. 30-person stand-ups. Hey, Google Slide tracking tools. I'm going to show you a screenshot of that later, but we use Google Slides to track all of our work. We had a lot of these people running around calling themselves tech leads, but there were no actual engineering managers anywhere. And then things were just going slow, really, really slow pace of development. We're not shipping a lot of software. And amidst all that, we just had a ton of work to do. Does anyone look at Reddit nowadays and think there's not a ton of work to do? It needs a few tweaks. So a lot of work to do, and I also was asked to scale the engineering team up. I needed to hire about 100 people. So that was the jungle, I guess, I was dropped into, and I needed to figure out what to do. So this talk is going to be about the techniques and tools I use to get the team size up without things kind of going off the rails. I'm not going to tell you everything we did, but hopefully you'll find this useful. So let's talk about the first challenge, which is finding managers and then figuring out what to do with all these people who are calling themselves tech leads. So I remember back when I started my engineering career, I guess 15 years ago now, I asked my manager, so what is a tech lead? I don't understand what this title means. And he's like, I don't know. No idea. And now, with 15 years of experience, and I'm an actual bona fide executive, mind you, I can honestly tell you no one really knows what that title means. tech lead is kind of a proto-manager at most companies. I think that's the best way you can describe it. It's for people who like may go into the architect track, may go into the management track. For the purposes of this discussion, which is not going to be philosophical, it's going to be very, very practical, we're going to call tech leads proto-managers. And fortunately, when I landed at Reddit, there were a lot of these folks around, but we needed to decide what to do with them because I needed actual managers. So I came up with a test. Any of you guys like watch Blade Runner? Good, and there's a remake coming out this weekend, so buy tickets if you can. So I came up with this, in Blade Runner there's a test. It's used to determine whether or not something that looks like a human being is actually a human being or an android. So I decided to come up with the same test. Something that looks like a manager is actually a manager or versus an architect. So this is the Voightkampff test for eng managers. First question, what do you care about more, people or architecture? I think that's a pretty straightforward one. If you're a good manager, and you're going to work for me anyway, you better care about people more than architecture. Second thing, what are your thoughts towards shipping on a deadline? If you're a manager and you don't think it's important to be able to hit dates, that's a problem. But I've worked with many a great architect who could care less about when the software got delivered. Third thing, your PM goes to 2 of your direct reports and asks them to start working on an urgent new feature. What do you do? All right? You guys are all managers. Hopefully you realize you cannot have the PMs drop shipping straight into your organization and moving things around. And then finally, you spend 1 full day a week trolling LinkedIn, getting rejected, and working with recruiting. How do you feel? All right? So as a manager on a team where you need to hire 100 people in the organization, you're going to spend a lot of time working with recruiting and on LinkedIn. So using this, we kind of ran that flow, and we were able to separate out all the people who called themselves tech leads into managers or architects. But it wasn't quite enough. So now I've just got a bunch of people who think they can be managers. We still have some other problems going on at the company. I'll summarize it by roles and responsibilities. So at a small company, some of you guys may be at companies that have this, like really, really small companies, there's a lot of role overlap. I think the classic example of this is like your 2-person startup. You got the guy who's the tech guy and the guy who's the business guy. But if you dig in, you see what those people are actually doing. Very likely that that company's so small that maybe the CTO is actually helping out with like sales calls and things like that. So there's lots and lots of overlap. As the company gets bigger, you need to kind of tease these roles apart into more and more specialized roles. So you're going to end up with eng, product, design, maybe even more specialized things, your growth team, your marketing team, legal, BD, and sales. So Reddit had this problem in spades. Like, I won't tell a story about how I dealt with it. I'll tell a story about how our chief legal officer dealt with it. Her name's Missy Tidwell. She is like one of the smartest lawyers you can imagine. And her first day at Reddit was to walk into a room. It was the title of the meeting happening in that room was Reddit Legal Counsel. All right. So you can imagine that Reddit might have a lot of different legal issues that it deals on a day-to-day basis. So we need all the smartest people to figure out what to do about these legal issues. So Missy walks into this room, and who is working on the toughest legal problems of Reddit at that time? Well, of course, it's a room full of like 10 IC engineers. All right? As if you could take 10 IC engineers, rub their brains together, and on the output would be like a Harvard-educated lawyer. So Missy encountered that, and she shut it down almost immediately. But that's just to give you an example of the kind of overlap that you see. Now, how do you fix that? I'll give you guys kind of an example here that we actually used at Reddit early on. If you haven't seen this thing before, this is a RACI chart, stands for Responsible, Accountable, Consulted, Informed. The idea behind this chart is that you get all the people in your organization, you list them out, and then you get all the different activities in the organization, you list those out on the other axis, and then you decide, is that person responsible, accountable, consultant, or informed for that particular activity? And the nice thing about this is you end up with really, really clear ownership delineation. You know exactly for your entire org who should be doing what. And the thing that we used this for at Reddit was this distinction. So this is a fundamental problem we had at Reddit. As you're trying to get new engineering managers and they need to know what to do, Well, if you're at a small company, you might have what are called program managers. Some of you guys may have these folks, but these guys are kind of dual hitting. They're doing a little bit of engineering manager responsibility, and they're also doing a lot of product management. So as you scale up, what often happens is that role kind of splits into two things. You'll have engineering managers and who are doing the architecture and the execution, the how and when things are going to be delivered. And then product is really spending much more time with customers, figuring out the vision and strategy. So they're handling the who, what, and the why. So we did the RACI chart, and it got us to this point. I think that just to drill in a little bit more, like the RACI chart does have some disadvantages. One is inflexibility. Sometimes there are people in your organization who actually can switch hit. They can actually do multiple things. I'm not going to claim it'll be common that an IC level engineer is going to be on your legal team, but occasionally you do get like an IC engineer who can help with design, or a designer who can help with product, that sort of thing. And this makes your org a little bit more inflexible than it might otherwise be. The second kind of problem with using this chart is it doesn't really address the core underlying issue, which is lack of trust. What you really want to do in any organization is not spend a lot of time filling out these charts. All right, so I give you this as an example, but I'm telling you, if your org is actually spending a majority of its time trying to resolve ownership problems by filling out this chart, there's probably a more fundamental issue you need to deal with. So, and I claim that that's lack of trust. So what I like to tell people is, people feel okay to say that's not my job when they can also say the person we hired to do it is amazing. So you want to figure out the steps necessary to get to that point. We did 3 things at Reddit to try and get to that point. First one, we piloted a team with engineering managers and some of the process I'm going to tell you about a little bit later. We did a pilot on one team, showed results, showed much more rapid progress and clarity of what was going to be delivered on that team, and then we spread it out to the rest of the organization. So use a pilot program, easy way to get things kickstarted. Second thing is leadership offsites. We didn't actually do trust falls here, but getting people outside of the building to kind of have straightforward, candid conversations about R&R helps, and it particularly helps if those are executive level offsites. So if your exec team is coming in and saying, hey, these are the new roles and responsibilities that need to change, that message goes down through the organization a lot more clearly. And then the final thing was kind of my favorite, because coming into Reddit, I'm seen as this ex-Microsoft big company guy landing all this crazy new process into the company. Why should we listen to that guy? Well, the great thing about hiring people is it eventually forces you to have to solve some of these problems. So scale pressure and complexity will in and of themselves begin to force you to need some of these additional processes. Like one of the things I was told early on when I joined Reddit, like, don't worry about the org chart, it'll figure itself out. Well, yeah, land 100 people in your org and let's see how far you get without an org chart. Scale pressure and that sort of additional complexity can force the delegation you need to get at your R&R problems. So that's how we tackled that. Let's talk about results real quick. How did that all turn out? So at Reddit now, there's 0 tech leads or program managers. We've got 10 architects, 10 product managers. 50% of our managers are promoted from within, and we have about 20, it's a little bit higher than this now, 20 managers and directors. So we got our org filled out. 2 managers went back to IC. So my test, the Voightkampff management test, is about 90% accurate. The best thing about the outcome of all this is that we now have an actual org chart that we can point to and say this part of the org is responsible for this part of the product, et cetera. And that was my favorite outcome of all of this change. So let's see, next one up. Now we've got managers, they know what they're supposed to do, but they need to execute. And the challenge here is that I'm hiring managers into an organization, new managers into an organization that is simultaneously scaling. All right, so we're growing really fast. So what do we do? There are 3 challenges when you're scaling a product or an end organization. First one's awareness. And the reason this is a challenge is because you're doing way more things than anyone can keep in their head at one time. And everyone wants to know what everyone else is doing. Nobody wants to say what they're doing. They want to know what everyone else is doing. and that's the problem you have to overcome. Second thing is there's just more things to coordinate, and this is where process comes into play. Your engineers who were on the team when it was only like 5 or 10 people are going to say, I don't need process, I don't need managers, why do we need these things? Can't you just trust us? We're all adults here, just let us be ourselves. And the answer to that is no, you actually do need some managers. You have to trust me on this. Final thing is bottlenecks. If you get any of these wrong at scale, a bottleneck in one part of your organization can cause real problems with dependencies that take down other parts of your organization in ways that you may or may not expect. So these are 3 things that become increasing challenges. And just to drill into it a little bit more, because I went through the trouble of getting an MBA and I can make charts like this. It's 100 grand well spent. So why does this actually happen, right? So as your number of people increases, the amount of communication overhead also increases to the point where your efficiency begins to drop. So when you're getting those initial few engineers, you'll see a lot of increased output, but eventually it'll start to drop, and eventually things will eventually get less efficient. You'll get less output for every new engineer you hire. The only way you can fix this is a process change or reorg. So we're not going to talk about reorgs, we're going to talk about process changes in this meeting. So just to let you know where we're starting from, as promised earlier, this is Reddit's first project tracker. This is a Google sheet with a picture of Aquaman, and, and that's Batgirl, if you guys aren't into comics. So there's a lot of problems with this. You know, you can tell, like, because it has to be handmade, a lot of this information is going to be inaccurate. Another thing that was going on at the time, teams were not consistently using JIRA when we started, when this exists. So you may click on this link. Some of the links may go to JIRA boards, some may not. There were 12 different of these slides, each with a slightly different format, each with maybe using JIRA, maybe not. And I do like the cartoons. We'll talk about that later. We sometimes spent more time in our sprint meetings talking about which superheroes to put on the slide than we did about the actual work. All right, so that's where we started from. And I needed to come up with a process that will work and get us away from that. Now, one gut reaction, you guys are all engineering managers in the room, you might just come and land some huge process on your organization. So I want to talk about the philosophy about what I did instead of that. So if you find yourself in this situation, my advice is avoid process junkies. I think it's one of the more dangerous things you can do as an engineering manager is blindly take like an agile framework book and just dump it onto a brand new team that's never had any process. That is typically a recipe for immediate rejection. So instead, I kind of go back to the roots of where Agile came from. So if you guys have ever read a paper, it's called the Toyota Production System. And if you go and read that, it's a really, really interesting paper. If you're into management, I strongly suggest you just Google it right now and look it up. But Kanban comes from the Toyota Production System. And there's a kind of a key element there that I've always found fascinating. So if you're on a line in a Toyota production factory, like this person here, there's a little cord above every station. And so the workers are working on the car. If they notice a quality issue, if they notice something wrong, they pull this cord and it stops the entire production line. The managers descend from manager heaven and come down to the production line and they talk to this worker and they figure out like what's wrong. And only then are new processes created, right? So if you use this system and you just repeat that technique, if you use that and repeat it, what you end up with is organically grown process that fits exactly what you need, all right? And it's a system that I like. The other thing I want to call out, the reason I like this is that process becomes culture over time. So whatever you decide to start doing, particularly as a small company and you're scaling up, that is going to start to stick and be your culture. So at first you may get some resistance, but eventually you'll get resistance in the opposite direction. People won't want to change. So you might as well pick the right culture up front. Pick processes that align with the culture you want. My philosophy, be organic, be flexible. Like use a system that doesn't require a huge handbook. Use one that allows more flexibility. So that's why we go with this. Okay, so with that, we did need some starting point. I've run more than 10 engineering teams, and this is kind of my minimum viable process for any engineering team that I use. It's great for director level. It's got 6 steps for any piece of work you might want to do in an organization. Defining the work, planning it, figuring out who's going to staff it, execution, actually building the product, launching it, getting it out into the world, having some go-to-market strategy, and then monitoring the product once it's out in the world. So this is what I used at Microsoft many, many times. When I came to Reddit, we don't have quite the same tools. I asked our IT guy to convert that slide into this JIRA workflow. So he fortunately knew how JIRA worked and was able to put that together for me, and it unlocked quite a bit of power when it comes to tracking what's going on at the company. So we went from that previous manual slide deck that you saw before to now we have in JIRA, every team gets a little report that says across all the work that they're doing, what phase is it in? Like how many things are on the backlog, how many things are in planning, staffing, execution. We can also do clever things like figure out what's blocked, off track, and on track. And as a manager, I can just come in here, click off track, and I can see all the off track work across my entire company. But this isn't really useful for daily stand-ups. It's good for director and above. We need something for stand-ups. We added Kanban board system. You can see there's still the same phases across the top, but now you can see that across every single team, they get their own Kanban board, which allows them to hold daily stand-ups. So I'll show that real quick. If you're on our conversations team and you're doing a stand-up, you might come in and take a look at this and move tickets across the board. If you want to just see what's off track, you can click these little control buttons at the top. So really good for stand-ups, but what about reporting to the rest of the product team? This is good for stand-ups, but it doesn't give you kind of that roll-up feel. So we tried this guy, JIRA plus Tableau. So this one, if you guys are management wonks, this is like the nuclear option. This gives you everything. So across the top here, you have a list of every product team at Reddit. You can click on that, and in real time, you'll get an update of all the work along with the current status of that work in a report, along with health metrics and an automatically generated release calendar, all right? So this is something we produced by linking JIRA to Tableau. This is maybe a little too much. So if you're from a business intelligence company like myself, maybe you'll geek out over this. We need something a little bit simpler, and this is where we ended up, executive level dashboards. So this is a dashboard built in Power BI. We also use Mode as well if you guys are looking for tools to use. The key thing about this is its high-level summary, 1, and 2, the cartoons have returned. This really holds our executives' attention. All right, so that's how our process and tooling evolved. The final thing, which is a key element, is urgency. All right, so I said earlier that things weren't shipping really quickly at Reddit. So it was not uncommon when I first joined Reddit to see engineers kind of playing Smash Brothers, more engineers perhaps playing Smash Brothers than were actually out on the floor coding. And Smash Brothers is actually a pretty fun game, so you don't really want to get mad at them about that. You don't want to take their controllers away. Like, what you really want to do is ask yourself, like, why is my engineering team more excited to learn Link's special move than they are to ship new software to 300 million people? What are they missing in that equation? So I think to get urgency out of your team, you got to do a few things. The first is you got to give them a clear mission, what you're trying to accomplish, and more importantly, how they fit into it. All right, that's the key thing. The second is you want your team to understand how their work is going to impact some user or the customer. So if you do those two things, you get to motivation. But you're still left with kind of a looming problem of, okay, fine, so people are motivated, but I need them to hit dates. All right, so what do you do there? There's bad ways to do that, worse ways to do that, and I'll suggest a good way to do it. So the bad way to get dates out of your team is to just come in top down, slam them with the date, and say we have to hit something by this deadline. Nobody likes that because of the following observation that I think I can make after 15 years in management. Pretty much all of the actual use for information is coming from the bottom, all right? The people who actually know how to build things and the people who most accurately know how to do estimations are pretty much your ICs. And you want, if you're going to be planning a project, you need them to be involved in setting the dates. So you don't want to set top-down dates, you want to set bottoms-up dates. You definitely don't want to force people to work late hours because that is a sign of poor management and poor estimation. And then even worse is if you decide to have no dates at all, like if you're running your org with just no dates. The best kind of urgency, I think, is just discipline in disguise. So if you do all of the things that I suggested before, you should end up with a clear set of deliverables, a clear set of mission statements that you can hand to your engineering team. You have dates that they have generated and are intrinsically motivated to hit, and then hopefully you just turn the crank, and what you will get is something that seems like urgency, but is really just your engineering team running like clockwork. All right, so those are the 4 things that we did at Reddit. Here are some results I'd like to share with you. This chart represents the amount of output at Reddit. We measure output by the number of epics that we ship every quarter. When we first started, with no extra headcount, simply adding the process changes that I've just described, we almost doubled the output of the team. Now the rest of this growth comes from continued efficiency and additional hiring, but in those first 2 quarters, we did almost no hiring, and we got lots and lots of output. Second thing, list of all the things that we have shipped at Reddit over the past year. New moderator, mod mail tool, launch of new profile pages, a whole new ad platform, international Reddit, new video platform, new search platform, new chat platform, and then at some indeterminate time in the future, which I will not share with you at the exact moment, there will be a complete site-wide redesign. So this is a complete transformation, bottoms up, of the entire platform in under a year. And I'm pretty happy with that. So what's next? At Reddit, we got to hire more engineers. We've got to get about 30 more people. We have to make Reddit more welcoming. Reddit, if you are a fan of it, you will probably agree it's not the most easy thing to get into. And as a platform, we want to grow from 300 million users to maybe 600 plus. And we think we can do that by making the site look better and making it easier for people to find content that's more relevant to them. And that's where personalization comes in. So these are the major initiatives over the next, I would say, 3 to 4 months. And with the processes that we've instituted, we have a very likely chance of hitting those goals. So with that, calls to action, you can follow me on Reddit, Twitter, Medium, or LinkedIn. If anyone is interested in joining Reddit, we are hiring like crazy. We've got several director and engineering manager positions open. And then just for me on a personal front, I run a nonprofit called Color Code Fund. If you go to colorcode.fund, you can see we're raising money for future people of color in engineering positions. So with that, thank you. And I think we will have time for questions. Yeah. All right, thanks. All right. Do I have time?
We can do 2 questions.
2 questions? Okay. What
First ones.
Let's see. How do we hire for? So, at what point should you start thinking about splitting up an engineering team into sub-teams? You should start thinking about it on 2 dimensions. I don't know who asked that question, but first one is, do you have a clear product reason to do it? All right. So you want to, whenever you're thinking about your org chart is it needs to be shaped in the way that you're going to attack your product problems, all right? So you don't I think someone was probably expecting me to say, if it gets to 5 people, just split it up. That's not the right answer. Think about what product problems you're trying to solve, build your org around the products that you're trying to, product problems that you're trying to address. What does it mean for a director of engineering to become a VP of engineering? So at a director level, you're primarily responsible for resources, timing, delivery, org chart, that sort of thing. At a VP level, what I would say is that obviously you're managing a broader set of things, but you're much, much more focused on strategy and external facing roles. So for example, I'm talking to you guys, me and Luis, we're at a conference last week talking about search. At the VP level or at the executive level, your influence extends beyond the borders of the company. Like, that's the simplest way that I can put it. You need to be involved in the world. Whereas at a director level, you're still largely inward-facing, responsible for resources within the walls of the building. That's it. Okay, thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.